Her hair was so very golden, her eyes so very big and blue, her lashes so very black, her mouth so very red and small, but now she had become an odalisque. Mabel's friends realized that she would do nothing to save herself. They must do all. Hesitating no longer, Monny struck her hands loudly together. Yeena did not come. The girl clapped again, and yet again, till her palms smarted, but nothing happened. "Yeena is in it, whatever they mean to do," said Mabel. "She's had her orders." "Very well, then," Monny persisted, her eyes shining and her cheeks carnation. "You must go without your wraps. Come along. Don't be frightened. Isn't it better to risk something to get away than to stay here all alone when we're gone?" The pretty doll, with a little moan, gave herself up to her friends. Brigit as well as Monny realized that the moment had come. They must take her while she was in this mood. "Let me go ahead," said Monny in a low, firm voice. "You know why." Brigit did know why. Monny had Anthony's Browning, and she alone understood the use of it. Yes, she must lead the way, yet Brigit longed to fling herself in front, to make of her body a shield for the tall white girl she had so loved and admired. Biddy put Mabel in front of her, and behind Monny, keeping her between them with two cold but determined little hands on the shrinking shoulders, and so pushing her along, protected front and rear, in the piteous procession. Of course, if the door leading toward the house entrance had been locked on the outside, there would have been the end of the endeavour, for the moment, but it opened to Monny's hand, and all three went on unchecked, until they came to the vestibule, where on the wall bench they had seen the Koran of the fat negro, awaiting his return. They had come tiptoeing, and had made no more sound than prowling kittens, yet he sat there facing the door, no longer heavy-lidded, a black mountain of lazy flesh, but alert, beady-eyed, as if he had been counting the minutes. As they swept through the doorway, hoping to surprise him, the eunuch jumped to his feet as lightly as a man of half his weight, and smiling with pleasure in the excitement of an event to break monotony, he blocked with his great bulk the aperture between wall and projecting screen. No wonder they had not needed to lock doors, with this giant for a jailer, and a big Sudanese knife conspicuously showing in a belt under his open galabeah. Rechid had perhaps wanted the white mouse in his trap to feel the thrill of hope, and then the shock of disappointment. He had counted completely on the guardian of his harem, but, though he had chosen an American wife, he had not counted on the courage of another type of American girl. The knife looked terrible, but it was sheathed and tucked into a belt. Anthony's Browning was in Monny's hand, and hidden only under her serge coat. Out it came with a warning click of the trigger, and with an astonished, frightened gurgle in his throat, the negro involuntarily fell back. "Run!" Monny breathed, prisoning him where he stood, with the little bright eye of the Browning cocked up at his face. She had to be obeyed then, and they ran, the two of them, flashing past the black man, touching his clothes as they squeezed by, yet he dared not put out a detaining hand. When they were away, safe or not, she could not tell, Monny still kept the pistol in position, but began slowly to turn, that she too might pass the dragon, holding him at her mercy till the end. Not a word of Arabic could she recall, but the Browning spoke for her, a language understood without the trouble of learning, by all the sons of Adam. When she had backed through the doorway, the girl still faced toward the inner vestibule, and it was well she did, for scarcely was she out of his sight before the black giant was after her, taking the chance that she would have turned to run. But there was the resolute young face, with eyes defying his, and there was the weapon ready to blow out such brains as he had, if the hand on the knife moved. Again he fell back, and then Monny did run, making the best use she had ever made of those long limbs which gave her the air of a young Diana. She ran until she had caught up with the other two, flying toward the distant gate, for something told her that the negro would have hurried to tell his master of the trick the woman had played, preferring the lash on his back perhaps to a bullet through his head. She was right, no doubt, to trust her instinct, for the eunuch did not pursue, though his tale of failure was not needed. Rechid Bey had been watching from the window of the selamlik, as Mabel his wife had watched when he received visitors. He did not wait for the negro's warning, but dashed out of the house, followed and then passed by several long-robed men in Arab dress. The faces of these were almost hidden by the loose hoods which desert men pull over their heads in a high wind, but had they been uncovered the women would not have seen them. The thing was to escape, not to take note of the pursuers, and it was only Biddy, looking over her shoulder for Monny, who even saw that they were followed. She cried out to her friend to hurry, that someone was coming, that they must get to the gate or all would be ended; then, feeling Mabel falter, she held her the more tightly, and ran the faster. Rechid and his companions were shouting, not to the women but to the gatekeeper, and as the master's furious voice rang out, just in front of the fugitive, all three together now, appeared the big form of the man at the gate. Monny did not know what to do, for in whichever direction she faced with the Browning, she could be captured from the other. She might kill the negro, and then turn to keep the pursuers back, but the thought of killing a man sickened her. She had meant only to threaten, not to take life. Suddenly she felt afraid of the Browning. She hesitated, in a wild second of confusion, hating herself for failing her friends, yet unable to decide or act; but hardly had the gatekeeper sprung in sight than he went down, flat on his face, struck in the back of the neck by the shabby fellow who had driven their carriage. "Go on!" the dirty-faced Arab said in French. "There's someone else to drive you. I'll follow. I'm armed." The three sped by him, as he stood aside to let them pass, showing to Monny a pistol which matched the one he had lent her. This consoled the girl in obeying, for as Antoun had trusted her courage in this adventure, so did she trust his, and his strength and wit against 4 men or 4 dozen men, if need were. There was the waiting arabeah, and there on the box was a much cleaner, more self-respecting Arab to drive it than the soiled figure which had left the horses and stayed in the garden. Afterwards they learned that the new man was the sister's cousin's uncle of the Hadji's café acquaintance. He had been engaged to stroll past in the road, stop, speak, offer the gatekeeper a cigarette, drift into conversation, and be ready to jump onto the box seat the instant Antoun left it. His instructions included the furious driving with the 3 ladies, once they had all bundled into the arabeah, to the temple of Mût. Rechid Bey had every right, according to his own point of view, to resent the kidnapping of his wife, and to get her back in any way he could, even if blood had to be spilt. But his companions, they who were muffled in the cloaks and hoods to save their faces from the sharp wind, had perhaps not the same right or interest. In any case, when they saw that the woman had a man, or men, to help them, and that so helped they had passed from the privacy of the garden to the publicity of the road, the 3 fell back. Publicity, it may be, did not please them, or else, thinking to have only women to deal with, they were not armed and did not like the look of the pistol. Rechid, evidently no coward, or past feeling fear in the rage at the failure of his counterplot, ran on, wheezing slightly (he was fat for his age), toward the erect Arab and the prostrate negro. "Beast! Devil!" he panted breathlessly, and cried out other words of evil import in both Turkish and Arabic, threatening the silent man of the pistol with death and things even worse. But before he had gone far, the hooded men caught up with him, and surrounding, urged him back. What they said Anthony could not hear, or what he said in return, but he thought they were proposing some plan which appealed to Rechid's reason, for he showed signs of yielding. There was now no longer anything to detain the protector of the ladies, for by this time he hoped and believed that their arabeah must be far on its way toward the temple of Mût, the meeting place agreed upon. Accordingly he stepped over the unconscious gatekeeper, who lay with his nose in the grass, and backed calmly out of the garden. Not far off, an arabeah was crawling along the road, so slowly that one might have thought the driver half asleep. But this supposition would have done him an injustice. Dusk had fallen now, the purple dusk which drops like a curtain just after the pageant of sunset is finished, yet the driver was wide awake enough to pierce the purple with a pair of sharp eyes, and recognize the figure expected. He whipped up his horse, and the dirty Arab running to meet it, in a few seconds the latter was on the box beside the coachman. Then the arabeah turned, and dashed wildly off according to the custom of arabeahs, back in the direction whence it had been crawling. 2 dark-faced men in the vehicle talked rapidly in low voices, speaking the language not only of the country but the patois of Luxor itself. "Your brother passed you in his arabeah?" "Yes, Hadji, he passed with the 3 European ladies you told me had been in secret to visit their friend." Then Anthony knew that Brigid and Monny had been able already to carry out their plan of wrapping Mabella Hânem in one of their own cloaks. This was well, and would save gossip if the occupants of the arabeah were stared at by passers-by. And at the temple also it would be well, for if possible the Set were to know nothing, now or later, of the adventure. But though Anthony was glad of the news he had got from this Arab ordered to meet him at the gate, he did not settle down comfortably and say to himself, Thank goodness the thing is over. Those